I mean, I want to see the chopping the onions, the fish getting scaled or going into the fryer. I want to see things sizzle in oil. I loved the timpano scene in Big Night as they're building the different layers of those things. I mean, but the final scene in that film was also so simple, but also wonderful. It was the one take of him just making, I think, scrambled eggs and fresh bread in, cooked in olive oil.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our preview of our upcoming series, Foodie Films. We are joined by Monica Eng of the Chewing Podcast, also my former WBEZ colleague. She knows a lot about the movies we're planning to talk about, and we have a really fun conversation. And we're also going to talk with her about some amazing Chicago sandwiches that she has literally written the book on. But before we get into that, I want to tell you about a podcast you might enjoy. We've mentioned Big Campaign Stories on our show before. They're an actual play RPG podcast, and we got to be friends with them because of an appreciation for Snow Crash, the Neil Stephenson novel. That was the first thing we ever talked about on Upper Middlebrow, and the RPG world in which Big Campaign is set is based on Snow Crash. And I have to say, it can be really fun to hear a group of improvisers generating a story out of not exactly nothing, but just some notes in preparation from Jeff, the game master. And if you've been listening to our episodes, you know we're interested in the dramatic choices of whether or not to save a cat. And in fact, in an early episode of Big Campaign Stories, one of the characters, Oswald, had to make just such a choice.
You hear the meow of a cat comes chasing after you as you run to the door.
God damn it. Yes, I rescue the cat.
Yeah, the small golden cat you see on its necklace that says Cobbler.
Cobbler, come here, and I'll scoop him under an arm. All right. We're gonna do this chase with a cat under my arm. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully it's not afraid of heights.
And that is how Cobbler joined the gang. Anyway, here's how Jeff describes the show.
Hey everybody, my name is Jeff, and I run the Big Campaign Stories podcast. Our story focuses on 4 people working at a repo company, trying to keep afloat among a corporate dystopia and crushing debt. The world is one that we have been playing in and working on for a long time. The current homebrew setting is played with Pathfinder 1st Edition rules, but with more of a modern feel to it. Think something like Blade Runner or Snow Crash, but with magic. We try to release every Thursday, and when we cannot, we come up with small side episodes focusing on each character to help expand the world and lore. So, if you like greasy breakfasts, people trying to pay bills, and the occasional Lovecraftian monster, give us a listen. Alright, thanks.
All right, let's get into our conversation with Monica Eng of Chewing in Axios, Chicago about Foodie Films. Hey, Monica.
Hey,
Hi, Monica. Ooh, I like Monica's style. I can
my
already.
sweatshirt.
It's good.
The greatest. It's very soft too.
Monica also has lots of every level of croc, sort of like dress crocs,
Not
casual crocs.
Dance goes. They're dance goes.
Sorry.
Look like Crocs because they're the very limited edition plastic. Do we have any up here? Plastic dance goes that they stopped making. And so I bought up every single one I could find before they went extinct.
Where were they made? Or where is Dansko?
Denmark.
Oh. So they're probably more expensive than Crocs, too.
Oh, yeah. Danskos are very expensive clogs, though these were only like $70. And then I even found them like in the resale market for less. But they're just great. Spring, summer, winter, fall. I wish I could say that I'm selling them, but I don't. I have 10 pairs at least.
It's too bad Chewing can't get a Dansko sponsorship. I've been
trying to get an Aldi sponsor.
Oh, that you could actually get. I could see that happening.
But they don't like that I also do Aldi stories when they're doing something wrong.
I got excited because Louisa responded positively to the invitation. I was like, oh, we're going to get her. But then she's going to be at the casino. And I just have to ask, like, do we need to do an intervention? Like, is she missing a lot of tapings because of all the time that she's spending at the casino now?
No, she's reviewing the food there. I did my review.
Oh my god, that's awesome.
Do you have any questions before we formally like launch into our actual program?
About how long do you think we'll tape?
Probably like 45 minutes from now.
Okay.
Will that work? Can you manage that?
Yeah.
You
Tom
need
was
us
just
to
waiting
hurry
downstairs for dinner, but we'll be fine.
wanna
I
cycle
I
back.
told him to go ahead. Just tell me when to press.
Go ahead.
3,
Go ahead.
2, 1.
I'm not worried about it. I'm a really good audio
Okay.
producer. I can sync it.
Yeah, I've heard you good.
Monica, have you ever worked?
Yeah.
I know that you've been a reporter since you were like 12. Have you ever worked a back of house job? Louisa has, right?
Never, never, never. Everybody in my family, including both of my children, have worked in restaurants. I am the only one who's never worked in a restaurant. I just criticize them. It seems like the most hypocritical thing in the world. Yeah.
You got started pretty early reporting too, so it wasn't like you had to pay
Yeah.
you had another way to pay your way through college and all of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I helped like in my aunt's restaurant. Like I would sit there with the waiters and I would take these strings off of pea pods. But that's about it.
I was a line cook at a McDonald's. I don't know if that counts.
That counts.
But and
industry.
it was before they
Totally
had the
counts.
clamshell grilled. So we actually had the 1950s style like giant flat grills. And I mean, I definitely got some moves. Like I could cook 24 cheeseburgers at the same time while like doing a special order over here and like making a fillet of fish and stuff like that. So
While driving a school bus.
I can drive a school bus.
I know,
but that
you
was
used to
not.
tell us.
I'd never combined those two. Although that would be a great. It'd be a great gig, like a driving a bus hamburger stand.
Yeah.
I'm going to dive in, and
Let's
the
dive
first
in.
thing I would like to just do is list the movies we're going to watch this fall, and I'd like a show of hands from both of you if you've seen it or not. I'm just curious. I haven't seen all of them too. So the first one is Babette's Feast. Monica has seen it. The second one is The Cook, the Thief, the Wife, and her lover. His wife
and her lover.
I have seen that also. Monica has seen it. Tampopo. Monica has seen them all.
Monica is 3 for 3.
3 for 3. Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. Monica has seen it. Mostly Martha. Monica has seen that one. I have not seen that one.
5 for 5.
Big Night. We've all seen that. And Sideways. Chris, I know you've seen Sideways because I feel like we watched it together many years ago. Okay.
I feel
wow.
like Sandra Oh a lot of the time when I think of men who have wronged me. There's like she kicks the shit out of that guy.
Oh, yeah.
In Sideways. Very
because
cathartic scene, yeah.
he behaves very, very terribly. Yeah, she's wonderful.
See, next
in that
question.
movie, too.
Do you also identify with Sandra Oh during her role as Killing Eve?
I haven't seen that show. Does she kill people?
Oh, but eventually.
Okay.
She's a cop, and there's an assassin who's coming after her. I saw the first episode. It was very
It's
good.
very good.
Yeah,
It's a
it
great
was
show.
Excellent. Well, we're excited. I mean, so I was going to ask Monica if you actually like movies about food, and I'm going to guess the answer is I knew you liked movies because I remember during the pandemic you said your routine was to cook a meal and then like watch a movie every night. So apparently you
I do.
like-
I was a film critic for a while. At the Daily South, I used to have to review every single film that came out for a very short time when I returned from Uzbekistan. So I was in the screening room in Chicago almost 5 days a week. And I remember writing to my old pal, Roger Ebert. I said, Roger, how the hell do you write 5 film reviews a week? I don't care about these films. I don't want to write 500 words about this film because I just want to say, meh. And he said, well, Monica, that's what they're paying you to do. Think of your mom, think of like what you'd say to her, and then just start your lead that way. Because I was like, I can't think of another lead to save my life. That thankfully was only about 8 months. But then I've done film reviews for the Sun-Times Tribune and Southtown. So I was a film major for a short time, and I did a film review show at the University of Illinois. So
That's good advice from Roger Ebert. I also part of how he was able to do so many reviews. He was not the best note taker. Like I love his
sometimes,
reviews.
yeah, it's like, wait a minute, that didn't
but
really happen.
he's constantly like he'll get the quotes wrong. You know, he'll say like, and then the character says this, and it's actually not. It's sort of like what they said.
He was
but
going
it's not
so
actually
fast
what they
that
said.
sometimes he was flying by the seat of his pants. But he
he
got the essence
did,
right.
What, like 3 a week or something?
Oh,
like that?
5 a week. I remember when I was one of the film editors at the Tribune, I'd say to Michael Wilmington, who was the Tribune film critic, I'd say, Michael, come on, you can do 4 reviews a week. And he's like, stop comparing me to RoboCritic. And he was talking about Roger. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll sign out these other ones for freelancers.
You know, he's got that great website, or he created before he died,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that great website. And I will sometimes watch a movie and then look up on the website to see his review, and they've all been archived there, which is wonderfully. And I almost always 100% agree with him. Like if I don't like it, he often doesn't like it.
Yeah.
If I do like it, I recently looked up Karate Kid because I watched
The first
that
one?
for the first time in a long time. I was like, this is pretty good. I wonder what Roger Ebert thought of it. And because he was middle aged then, and it was kind of a kids movie. He liked it.
Yeah.
He gave it a good review. There was one, I think we disagreed about Falling Down. And Straw Dogs.
You liked
we
it or you
disagreed
didn't
about.
like it? Falling Down.
I did not like Falling Down as much as he did. I found
I found it
more
a little angry.
angry and racist.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think he quite picked up on that as much as there's scenes of Michael Douglas yelling at the Korean clerks to speak English and stuff like that, and I think that's supposed to be funny, and that kind of bothered me.
Capturing the zeitgeist of white rage, but it felt racist to me.
Yeah, and I think it was capturing the zeitgeist of white rage, but I also think maybe you were supposed to sort of disapprove, but maybe the audience was also sort of like, well, I disapprove, but I felt that way too. Like you're sort of disapprove, like you're not supposed to say it out loud kind of thing, as opposed to this is just racist and wrong. But what do you, so in your mind then, you've watched a lot of movies, you like food, what makes a good, and I actually kind of want all of us to talk about this, but what makes a good food movie?
For me, just like tons of freaking detail. I mean, I want to see the chopping the onions, the fish getting scaled or going into the fryer. But I mean, I admit that I have certain tastes that not everyone shares, but I really want to see the cooking because that is super cool to me.
What about you, Chris?
Let's see. I wasn't. What makes a good movie about film? I mean, having been a cook, I think that for me, I really want to see something that's true to that experience of working in a professional kitchen. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed the first season of The Bear. And there is an episode, the second to last episode, I was like, I can't watch this. I was like, I can't relive this particular moment.
The meltdown episode, the getting slammed. Yeah, that's traumatic. It's painful to watch.
And the moment when he ate the donut off of the ground, I was like, I think I've done that. There's so much about like food movies that kind of gets kind of romanticized. And I prefer a movie about food that really like gets to the heart of what it is to be a cook and like the kind of sensuality of it. There's this wild Tilda Swinton movie called I Am Love that came out in 2010, and there is a scene with a shrimp that is ostensibly about food but is way more about sex. And I was like, this is great. They're really like riding this metaphor into a place that feels carnal. And I think I like food movies where they get really into the details and they let it kind of speak to the like greater meaning about food in our own lives. Like it's something that we need to exist and it's really important and we do it at least 3 times a day a lot. That's kind of what makes a good food TV show or movie for me. Monica, have you seen The Bear? Have you watched that?
I have, and I've interviewed Jeremy Allen White it 3 times now. And I
don't
him,
think you're allowed to live in Chicago and not watch The Bear, especially if you work in.
Well, I mean, actually, I didn't finish the second season because I started to get so traumatized by the Seven Fishes dinner. One, it was filmed in my friend's house. I didn't realize that. They made his kitchen look like an 80s kitchen. But I also had a Sicilian mother-in-law who would make the Seven Fishes dinner and get progressively drunker as she did it and start screaming at everyone in the house, including the traumatized new daughter-in-law. And it was too much for me. I also have real problems. And I told Jeremy Allen White this. I said, look, what Italian beef restaurant in Chicago is not open for lunch? What Italian beef restaurant in Chicago has a pastry chef and bakes its own bread? And which one has family meal? I can't imagine why these details are brought in. And he's like, fair. That's what the kids say these days. Fair.
Fair. Heard.
Yeah. And so he didn't try to defend it. But all those things.
Well, it's not like he wasn't a writer, was he?
No,
I mean, it's not,
but come on, he could have said to Chris Storer, wait a minute, why aren't we open for lunch? Could we at least have a line saying, and because of our license, we're not allowed to be open for lunch?
Now, how many of those things that you just mentioned were things that his character did in his sort of desire to make it a more upscale?
Well, he walked in and it was already, these were already the rules. They already
had the pastry chef, and they were already closed for lunch. Yeah, and that's right. They had the guy.
But that said,
right.
I mean, I think the cinematography is beautiful. The acting is great. I could use a little less shouting. I don't really like to hear people bicker all day long. Child of divorce here. But maybe that's more than you need to know. But I like a lot of things about it. You know, Rick Bayless was saying it's going to scare anybody away from going into the field. Other people say it's done great things for restaurants.
Did you interview him about that, or did someone else? I saw
Bayless
him
did
quoted
it at a forum, I think a Wall Street Journal forum.
Okay. Well, I mean, you know, and maybe I think you and Louisa talked about this, but
did.
Like, if maybe people should be scared about going into those jobs. I mean, that kind of verbal abuse does happen in restaurants, at least. I mean, not at the McDonald's I worked at, fortunately, but everything I have heard suggests that kind of thing happens, and that Mr. Bayless is not immune from having those sorts of things happen in his kitchen, and kind of like, maybe they ought to get their act together if they're scared.
Yeah, maybe they should just cut it out.
Right.
But,
maybe actually treat people humanely in the kitchen, and you wouldn't have to worry about it.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter works at Ever, which is the restaurant where they shot a lot of the second season. And at that restaurant, actually, the kitchen is silent. Nobody's really allowed to speak. So it's not verbal abuse. It's you better know what you're doing, or speak very silently to the guy next to you, or not silently, speak quietly and say, "What the hell am I doing?"
A friend of mine worked at a place like that in LA, like worked at a totally silent, and the food they turned out was amazing. He said eventually it wasn't really to his taste, not the food, but the experience. Like, just it eventually was too tense. Like he never felt like he could actually relax while working, and it was just really hard. And also, like, he really didn't want to be in that kind of environment. Like, it was a little pretentious. I mean, it's a Michelin-starred place, but still, like, I can't imagine how hard that would be to be quiet for your entire shift.
Yeah, seems like it's Scylla and Charybdis, right? You can be verbally abusive or you can be silent. There's probably a nice, congenial, conversational,
happy
respectful, happy medium in the back. So here's a fun.
I like what you did with that metaphor. It's like, instead of a rock and a hard place, you're like, it's between a rock and a devastating whirlpool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm again referencing the canonical Police song that references Scylla.
Oh, I see.
Here's a fun trick. So, Monica, where would you go to get a beef in Chicago? What's your
Johnny's?
Your top three
Johnny's
Italian? Has
to be the place. It's in Elmwood Park, and there's always a long line, and you have to make sure you have your order when you get up there, because they're like, "What do you want?" "All right, I want a beef with a sausage dipped, sweet and hot." Okay, and then they also have Italian ice there. Otherwise, Al's is terrific, and they've got several
locations. Is Al's the one in Little Italy? Or
on Taylor. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And Mr. Beef, which is what the Bear was modeled after, is fine too. They've got very long lines now.
And there's one that's like on Western and Roosevelt, sort of, that I've heard is okay. I haven't been to that
Oh,
one.
I haven't been to that one.
And
Is it Jimmy's? No, Western and Roosevelt. I can't remember. Yeah.
One thing I think that's really funny about Chicago is that a number of people, when you ask them this question, they'll have like their answer, and then they will often say, "In an emergency," and this is the exact phrase they use. In an emergency, you can go to Portillo's.
Like, right, that's so funny.
I love the idea.
Italian beef emergency.
You would be having an Italian beef emergency such that my wife just went into labor and we got to go to the hospital right now and Frank's isn't on the way, but there is a Portillo's, so we can stop there before we, take her.
If there's a fire, I will go to Portillo's.
Yeah.
Or a tornado.
I'm going to play the straw person here. I've never lived in Chicago. I kind of have an idea of what it is you're describing, but Monica, could you walk me through what a beef is?
Sure. It is shaved, different types of beef, but hopefully a little bit of fatty cut, shaved, boiled beef, soaking in its own fatty gravy. And then you take an Italian roll, a bit like French bread, and you pile that hot beef and gravy in there. Then you top it with sautéed sweet green peppers and something we call giardiniera here, which is brined serranos and carrots and celery that is then put in olive oil. Well, not always olive oil. Now it's soybean oil, but it's sort of a salty, briny, pickled pepper in oil, and that goes on there. A new thing in the last decade, so I guess I shouldn't say a new thing, is a lot of people are putting cheese on it. I had never heard of that, but now, a lot of orders are coming in with cheese. And so when it's a French dip. That's what a lot of people would call it. So it's like a French
Except
dip
for
with giardiniera.
Spicier.
Yeah.
Spicier. They're okay. I feel like you turned me on to the Jim Shoe, which is like, it's like if you like an Italian beef, then just like multiply it times 7,
right,
and you get the Jim Shoe.
Like the Jim Shoe?
Yeah.
Is that GYM shoe?
Sometimes
or J-I?
Many different ways.
Sometimes JIM, sometimes GYM. And that's either Italian beef or roast beef and corned beef and gyros, all griddled with onions and chopped up in the latest
And
version.
then you often with tzatziki
sauce,
or what they call gyro sauce here in Chicago.
And then sometimes a tomato. And if you're very, very lucky,
sometimes a tomato.
Yeah, you can get a super crispy Jim Shoe, which is all that stuff rolled in a giant burrito tortilla, rolled up, sealed up, gently lowered into your fryer, comes out like the biggest, most flavorful egg roll of your life that can feed a family of 7.
Chicago just has I have a lot of complaints with Chicago. It's got the best fast food. Chicago has the best fast food, hands down.
Nice. Wow.
And the chains don't dominate here. The fast food is so good that hardly any. I'm sure everybody goes to McDonald's every now and again. Popeyes, when they had their sandwich, does all right. But unlike most of America, people get their fast food from family-owned restaurants in Chicago.
And how would you know?
What?
How would you know which of those 30 foods were invented in Chicago in these independent?
You're holding up something rectangle. What is that?
It's very blurry. You'll have to narrate it for us.
It's called Made in Chicago.
Made in Chicago.
30.
Look at you.
Yeah, I don't want to plump for my book. But yeah, this is where we tell the story of every food that was invented, mostly fast food in Chicago.
You have a co-author too? Is
yes,
that right?
Dave Hammond. And we're still touring with it, but it only came out in February. So we're doing an event at the Chicago Historical Society on the 21st, something like that.
Of what? Of this month? This month or next?
This month.
Okay,
so
that might be before. I think this is going to come out the first week, but we'll definitely put a link to your book.
I got more. We're talking to Mensa the week after anyway. But yeah.
Speaking of sandwiches, you also have a Chicago hand painted Jibarito sign
right back of me. That's right.
Too.
Yeah.
Bag, have you ever had a Jibarito?
I have not. I'm learning a lot.
I would say
today.
these are my two favorite sandwiches. We've talked about the Jim Shoe, and both of which, Monica, do you want to explain the Jibarito? I think it's better than a beef, personally.
Sure. It's a steak sandwich, but instead of instead of using bread, you take green plantains, slice them, smash them. Sorry, slice them, fry them.
Blanch them.
Well,
I think they blanch them so that they'll smash in the smasher.
Well, okay. Peel them, slice them, put them in cold ice water, fry them, smash them, fry them again, and then you use that as your bread. Those are called, they're called tostones. So I'm Puerto Rican, and when my grandma would cook for us growing up, we would all fight over who got the tostones. And that's basically a green plantain deep fried and then salted. And so basically use tostones as your bread. And it was it was invented in Chicago in the early 90s because this guy who was down on his luck was reading a newspaper called El Vocero from Puerto Rico, and he saw a recipe for something called a sándwich de plátano. And so he made it for his dad, and then he Chicago-fied it with American cheese and mayonnaise and tomatoes. He served it, and he smeared it with some garlic on top. And he served it, and overnight his restaurant that was like a total loser went to with like lines out down the block. And then he never patented it, and now you've got like dozens of places across the country that now serve it.
There's this place in Pilsen that does them, and they put aioli on the outside of the deep-fried plantain, and to me it's just too greasy. Like my fingers get covered in garlic aioli, which I don't like. If it was inside, I'd be all right with it, but... that guy's place is over in Humboldt Park, right? Or Logan Square or something
Well,
like that?
he ended up going bankrupt. He forgot to pay his taxes. So last time I talked to him, he was working for his nephew.
Another very Chicago story.
But
he's a genius. He should be, like, they should all be paying him royalties.
I know,
Everybody who's
right?
making a Jibarito.
His brother still has a restaurant. It's called Borinquen. Now it's by Lane Tech. Anyway, but it's a terrific sandwich, and you got to eat it right there because like a lot of deep fried starches, like French fries, they're not going to be great 10 minutes later.
It's no good. It's no good 4 minutes later.
I've tried to make those plátano or plantain. I've tried to make that,
Tostones?
and I have a deep fryer. Yeah, and I just could never get it right. And maybe it worked out.
Do you have a
one time.
smasher? So do you have a thing to smash them
I
afterwards?
was smashing it with, I want to say like I
bag
used
and
a
a
wine
brick?
bottle or something like that.
Anyway, we're really talking about movies here, aren't we?
Yeah. And
This is
I'm
the way
nervous
we go,
about
right?
Colin's dinner too. So maybe we ought to hear your recommendation. Actually, before we hear your recommendation, I mean, how did we do? You've seen all these movies. I have not seen Tampopo. I have not seen Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. I've not seen Mostly Martha. Do we have a good selection? In your opinion, do we have a good selection of
these would be
foodie
the
films?
same ones that I would choose. The one that my only other one is an obscure Korean film from 1995 that I was trying to think, did I misremember it? It was playing at Facets in Chicago, which is sort of like the art house place, and I went there one Saturday afternoon to review it. I was blown away by it. And by today's standards, you're going to look back on it and say, oh, God, that looks like kind of low budge. But that's, when Korea was really starting to come into its own in terms of sort of international film. And it's this film about a cook who lives in 301 and a writer who lives across the hall in 302. The writer is anorexic and has real food phobias because of some traumatic things that happen in her life. And the cook across the way, she has just gotten divorced because like every day her husband would come home and she's like, I made this incredible meal, and he just did not appreciate her. And she started eating and putting on weight and feeling bad about herself. And she wanted to heal this woman by cooking all these incredible meals. And then it became the psychological thriller of, the 302, she ends up going missing. So people are like saying, oh, did you kill her? And it goes back in time. They jump in terms of time, they jump all over the place. But there are really incredible cooking scenes. It looks into body image and how how their past affects their desire for cooking and nurturing others, and then other people's sort of revulsion with food and their associations with food. One of the girls, she grew up in her father was a butcher, and she had to watch all this stuff go on, and the money, and let's say some bad things happened to her. Anyway, it's this really incredible psychological exploration using food and cooking.
What's it called? What's the
It's
title?
called 301 302. And I found you can actually watch it on YouTube, which I did while doing yoga the other morning, just to make sure I was remembering it properly.
Excellent, excellent.
A psychological thriller while doing yoga.
Yes,
Just what you want.
yes.
Monica and I are going to get along.
There you go.
With this.
One of the things that brings up, and Monica, if you need to go, we can wrap up really quickly. So I have a couple
Let's do
other
another
questions
15
on my
minutes.
mind, but okay, sounds great. So one of the things that brings up is some of these films are restaurant films, right? And you both talk about loving seeing the cooking happen, and I agree with that too. Some of them are kind of more like vernacular cooking. The cooking is happening in a family context or in someone's apartment, but often in a particular cultural tradition or something like that. And so in this one, 301, 302...
She's cooking at home. So you have all these flashback scenes of when she would cook for her husband, like homemade kimchi, and she would go to the market and get octopus, or she'd get mudfish, and you'd watch them like squirm as she's cooking them. And he kept saying, why don't you get, convenience food? And she said, no, I want to make everything from scratch for you. And so, I just loved these scenes of watching all the different steps of making all these dishes.
Well, and do you have a preference? Would you rather watch a film, since that's the thing you said that you really, really like, is the detail about the food preparation. Would you rather see a film that really captures a kind of like food tradition in the family or in the home really well? Or would you rather see kind of like the back of an ambitious restaurant?
Like Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, those are all in restaurants. Well, no, it's a half restaurant meals and half home meals, because remember, he makes all those nice things for his granddaughter. So I enjoy both, as long as it's detailed cooking stuff. It's like that's my porn. I just want some onions being chopped. I want to see things sizzle in oil. I loved the timpano scene in Big Night as they're building the different layers of those things.
It's amazing. That scene is incredible really, as they're trying to get it right.
Of the ones I've seen on this list, that one is probably my favorite too.
But the final scene in that film was also so simple, but also wonderful. It was the one take of him just making, I think, scrambled eggs and fresh bread. Cooked in olive oil.
They're all hung over in the kitchen the next day, and they're kind of angry at each other. And it's sort of the meal of forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
It's the sort of we're still brothers. And Stanley Tucci makes it look like he knows his way around a kitchen too. Like I don't know if he was ever if he ever worked in one or not, but he's got, to me it seems like he's got the moves. Yeah,
I was just in a Williams Sonoma, and as I was walking in, it's like Stanley Tucci cookware. So he's at least good enough to sell cookware.
He wrote that film, right, and co-directed it. So he clearly has some knowledge and that he's drawing.
How about you guys? Do you prefer restaurant scenes or home scenes? And before I say that, one more is Como Agua para Chocolate. I think is one of the best cooking movies. Yeah.
That's a really good one. Yeah, I saw it in high school, but I remember like the three sisters like chopping stuff up in the back together and then boiling. Yeah, what's your answer to that, Chris?
Well, I think I might turn that question back around, because it kind of hits at the question I had for you about like what do you get from the framing device of like food films? Like what do you think a director or writer gets when they decide that they're going to set their film or their piece of work inside this frame of a kitchen or meals or feeding somebody else or like all that stuff? Like, what do you think that framing device gives us that is different from the other framing devices that we see all the time in film and in books? I've kind of a follow-on question to this that you can see in the rundown, but that's kind of my I kind of want to take your question to me and turn it around and fire it back at you.
That's a really good question, and I never even thought of it. I see it, I guess, as a vehicle for a film and stories about people's wanting to please others, wanting to nurture others, wanting to prove themselves on some sort of stage, and sometimes working through grief in a kind of because there's so much pressure and so much busyness in a kitchen. I've known a lot of chefs who are like, I can't deal with the outside world, so I'm going to go here because I don't have to deal with people. And it's so weird that journalists are like, hey, let me talk to you, chef. I bet you want to talk to me and tell a story. Like, sometimes they're in there because they don't want to tell anybody fucking stories. They just want to cook.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to answer the question you asked, and maybe this brings us sort of towards the wrap-up, because it also previews the first film that we're going to watch, which is Babette's Feast. I didn't actually answer the question of what I like about it, and I totally agree with what both of you said, but I think the thing that Monica just put her finger on is the thing I really like in a food story, which is that the films that really get you excited about food's capacity to heal and to bring people together. And, that's why that last one take scene at the end of Big Night is so great. They've had this kind of very difficult experience that's been the last 7/8 of the movie. And I think that Babette's Feast, which is our first film, that my understanding is, I've seen the previews, I've never actually watched the movie, but that's kind of what it's about, and it is kind of like a Mansfield Park type plot where a woman is sort of exiled from her home and she's living with people she's not that close to. And my understanding is she cooks, and in so cooking, she's able to kind of break through some of the barriers that she has with the people around her. But that the magic of that expansiveness that happens when you have a great meal with somebody, or you have a great family meal and people are experiencing the pleasure of the food, and they've had the fellowship of cooking it together in the family context, and maybe they've had some drink too, and all of those things are kind of mixing together to create this kind of ecstasy. There's also, there's a moment like that at the end of Cannery Row, which isn't really driven by food, but where suddenly everyone's just kind of happy to be together and to be in each other's company. And I love it when a film captures that and it feels realistic. And I feel like that's what Babette's Feast is known for. It happens in Sideways, the night they go back to the house, and not so much food, but wine. Drinking the wine has kind of put them into this like social high. And I think anytime a movie can kind of capture that experience, the power that food and drink and companionship has to kind of, transcend the day-to-day problems and put us into this other state. I love it when that succeeds.
Monica, have you seen the menu that came out last year?
I saw the first 15 minutes, and I don't like scary movies, and someone told me that there's a scary surprise, so I couldn't finish it. Got it.
My question that I was going to ask you was if you felt that was a foodie film or not. And I've got my own ideas, but I was like, this is a perfect chance to ask if she thinks that it's a foodie film or doing something.
I felt like it was trying to send up Foodie Films.
Yeah. It feels more like it felt more like satire to me than a movie actually about food. And I felt a little cheated.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you go to satire and you're like, there's a little too much allegory and not enough like substance, and that's what it really felt like for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it'll be interesting to watch The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover again. I'll be curious if you have that reaction too, because that is set in a restaurant and in a kitchen, but that is really the setting. The preparation of the food is almost incidental, even though it's really, really beautiful. I watched the preview to the menu, and I have the sense that, it's like this psychological thriller. Perhaps someone's going to get murdered or something like that. And it's all happening in the context of a chef preparing, an incredible meal for some lucky people, and in a secluded island. And I think that would probably meet my definition, but I haven't seen it. Because to me, it's not necessarily, Big Night is a movie about two brothers who want to create beautiful food and wonderful food in according to their particular cultural tradition, and things go awry. But I don't need the movie to be about the food for the food to work the way that I enjoy it, And in The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover, a lot of it's just the feeling of being in the space, you know, and of course there's a lot of the director was an oil painter, and a lot of the shots look like they look like a Caravaggio or something like that, you know. It's just incredible.
I haven't seen that in so long. I'd have to remember that. I think I saw it at the Toronto Film Festival when it came out.
It's gruesome, and I mean, there is a very important moment in which cooking happens that I don't want to spoil, but I do remember that one pretty well. Monica, is there anything else you want to, given that you know all these movies, we don't, anything else you want to say to us or prepare us for or suggest to us before we wrap up?
Well, I would say a lot of these movies are going to make you hungry. Like, you know, have a good ramen place in mind for after you watch Tampopo. Maybe think about going to a Taiwanese or just Chinese restaurant after Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. Get some pasta ready for a big night. Have anything but, what was it? Anything but Merlot. Ready for Sideways.
We're not drinking fucking Merlot.
Have you guys watched Billions, by the way?
No.
Well, so Paul
I really
Giamatti's
want
in
to.
Billions, and same, you know, he was in Sideways, and some producer is really into food because they have all these cameos from great chefs. But suddenly someone is like in the scene who's a terrible actor, and you're like, oh, that's Paul Bocuse, or that's like Wiley Dufresne, or that's David Chung, and they have a lot of like gratuitous food references. Anyway, I would just make sure you have good food available for after you watch these.
I love that idea.
Yeah. And you know, themed meals. And then think about, you know, it's a great question, Chris. Think about why they would want to use food to express what they want to say here. Because I'm gonna think about that one by one. Like, yeah, why food here?
Yeah, you need to pick something for your story to go in.
Yeah.
And most of the time, that choice we make somewhat sub or unconsciously as writers and creators, but we don't have to.
Yeah.
Like, you can pick the vehicle that works. And I think that food is such an interesting one, and it allows us to tell so many different kinds of stories.
We can all relate.
It's why I felt cheated by the menu. I think by leaving 15 minutes in, I think you didn't miss much that you couldn't pick up from a particularly angry tirade about any industry.
It was kind of like the falling down of the food industry. One thing I was going to say is there was this movie called Spanglish. Not a very good movie. It was Adam Sandler as a chef. But if you get the DVD version, I don't even think there's anything called a DVD anymore. But it had an extra where Thomas Keller of the French Laundry was teaching Adam Sandler about the perfect breakfast sandwich, or the world's best sandwich. And my kids and I watched it, and it was basically you make bacon and the perfect fried egg and great bread and then avocado, I think, but you rub the bread with garlic, kind of like you would do like the pan tostada con tomate in Spain. And so my kids were always like saying, "Mom, you got to make the perfect sandwich for me for breakfast." And they would go and sleep over at people's houses and then say to the mom, "Oh, no, you didn't rub it with garlic." And the parents would be like, "What is up with your kids?"
You're like, it's not my fault. It's Thomas Keller's fault.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to go watch it.
Yeah.
Monica, what part of China did your Chinese family come from?
The South. Most people whose family came 100 years ago came from the Guangdong region. Mostly Toisan, but so Guangdong is like the big sort of state, and our county was Sunway, but most people came from the county over called Toisan.
Right, so you have Chinese family background, Puerto Rican and Chilean, right?
Peruvian. So
Peruvian, sorry.
Peruvian grandpa, Puerto Rican grandma who raised us, helped raise us, and then the Chinese side.
And are there films or TV shows or books that get at those particular food cultures of like those three places, particularly that part of China?
Well, I mean, that's, if you're talking about like Chinese restaurants in the United States, I'm trying to think. I'm writing a young adult novel that actually gets at that, but I don't know if there are any others that kind of look at, growing up in a Chinese restaurant. I think someone's going to have to do that film based on Monica's book called The Happy Happy Dumpling House. And
you mentioned Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, but that's Taiwanese.
But that's like a Taiwanese catering cooking. He's a Taiwanese chef at a hotel. But I mean, a lot of the Taiwanese came from China, and a lot of them actually came from southern China. But probably like Hong Kong films. Like Hong Kong films always have lots of food in them, and Hong Kong food is largely the same Pearl River Delta food of my family.
I'm trying to think of a Hong Kong film that has food. I'm sure I can think of something.
It's like they like doing karate and then they stop and eat some soup,
right. Like the John Woo's gangsters stop and
eat
some salt and pepper fish fillet or something like that. With the jalapeno peppers or something. Yeah.
And what was like Kung Fu Warrior? I can't remember those, but they were like a whole series of them. Kung Fu Soccer. I think they had a lot of food in that too.
Kung Fu Soccer?
I'm gonna Google it now. Shaolin Soccer.
Shaolin Soccer.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
sounds pretty good.
Shaolin Soccer. I believe they have like a whole thing about soup with fish balls in it. That's another food film. Yeah.
We're gonna do our credits and then we'll make sure we get the name of your book. So. Upper Middlebrow is a Small Point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes are the porters, busboys, barbacks, and stars of the Dish Pit with our wrinkled fingers. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by Chris Bagg. Thanks to Monica Eng and Louisa, who wasn't here, but also to Louisa Chu, the other part of their podcast, Chewing, which you can learn more about at chewing.xyz.
That's totally right.
You can learn more about us, our podcast, at uppermiddlebrow.com. We'd love for you to help us out. We have a listener survey up on our website. Fill it out, and if you want, we'll enter you in a drawing to win a storied Bluetooth speaker, perfect for listening to the Chewing podcast or the Upper Middlebrow podcast. Go to uppermiddlebrow.com for the link to the survey.
And as a reminder, everybody, Jesse and I are both writers and editors. We can help you with your writing, podcasting, and editing projects. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com and jessedukes.com. Check it out and get in touch. Monica, before we go, could you tell us about the book that you are touring and that you are going to be releasing?
Oh, it's just a little book called Made in Chicago, Stories Behind 30 Great Hometown Bites by Monica Eng and Dave Hammond, University of Illinois Press, in its third printing already. Just came out in February.
Congrats.
But it's really fun. You can read it on the toilet, one dish per sitting. Or you can
food in, food out.
There you go. You can throw it in your glove compartment, and then anywhere you are in Chicago, you say, hey, wait a minute, what's a good thing to eat? And I tell you.
I've there have been many times, and I feel bad about this. I feel like I'm exploiting our friendship, but there have been times where I'm like in Chinatown and I'll just be like, where's the best place for, dumplings?
Yeah,
or where's
everyone
the best
does that to
Taiwanese hot pot?
I constantly get that text. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to pile on, but you always oblige, and it's always a good recommendation. Yeah. Monica, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining our podcast.
Same. Great to see you guys.
Nice to meet you. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah. Next time you're in Chicago, we'll all go out to eat.
I'd love that. That would be so much fun.
All right.
I have my favorite ramen place. Have you ever done High Five Ramen in the West Loop?
Yes, but there's often a long line.
There is. What you need to do is have your rock climbing gym 5 minutes away, and you put yourself on the line. Then you go rock climb at the gym for an hour and a half. Then you go get a drink at the barbecue place upstairs, and finally 2.5 hours later, and then play some pinball up at Green Street Meats, and then finally 2.5 hours later, you get into the basement that seats 14 people.
Excellent
and have the
plan.
most delicious ramen.
Yeah. I would often go to a place without a line and just eat my ramen there. But High Five is good. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's another one in Bridgeport that I like, Shinya, and then I know there's some stuff up north too. But yeah, next time in person. Hey everybody, one more thing. You may have caught this, but if not, the next episode will be the Axel Gabriel film Babette's Feast. It's available to stream, and it's pretty easy to find online, or you might be able to find it in your local library. After that, the next film is The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover, directed by Peter Greenaway. And that one is hard to find. I don't think it's streaming in North America, but there are some DVDs on the used markets like eBay and places like that. Or your local library might have it, or you might be able to get an interlibrary loan, which one of our listeners found out that he was able to do. Or maybe you live somewhere that still has a decent video store. If so, lucky you. It was a pretty well-known movie in the 1990s, so any video store that has foreign films is likely to have it. It's in English, but I believe it's an English production. If you absolutely can't find it, go ahead and send an email to hello@uppermiddlebrow.com, and we might be able to help. The other thing about The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover is that it has very explicit and disturbing violence, including domestic violence, spousal abuse, and it also has very explicit sex and nudity. I would probably not watch it with a kid, and you might consider whether it's something you are okay viewing. We totally get it if you need to skip that one or any of the things that we consider and talk about on our show. But if you can handle the sex and violence, I think it's worth watching. It's pretty incredible. So thank you so much for listening, and we will see you soon.